for warranty details.
Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniels today announced that Tua Tagovailoa will return to practice this week. The quarterback at an NFL press conference today asked about the risk of continuing to play despite a history of concussions.
Every time we all suit up, we're all taking a risk that we could potentially get hurt, whether it's a concussion, a broken bone, anything.
Tagovailoa was injured in Game 2 this NFL season and has been on injured reserve since then. Twice abused, the Turpin children from Riverside, California.
Their biological parents in prison for locking them up in chains. The Turpin children went to the Olguin home, a foster family where prosecutors say they were sexually abused by Marcelino Olguin and again forced to stay in their rooms with alarms on the doors. Elon Zexter represents some of the Turpin children.
The Olguins did horrific things.
He says the children are relieved Marcelino Olguin was given 7 years in prison on Friday.
What happened in that home was worse than what happened in their biological parents' home.
Alex Stone, ABC News.
Listeria fears have prompted a major recall of frozen waffles. Nearly 700 products made by Treehouse Foods being recalled. Some are sold under the Kroger, Target, and Walmart brands. There's a list online. So far, no illnesses reported. Drivers may face higher car insurance rates after the back-to-back hurricanes hit the country's southeast. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
You can live out your MasterChef dreams when you find a professional on Angie to tackle your dream kitchen remodel. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Inside to outside, repairs to renovations. Get started on the Angie app or visit Angie.com today. You can do this when you Angie that.
News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KBNU.
I'm Bill Walter, KBNU News. News is brought to you by Roof Rescue. In 2023, Envision Utah collected responses from nearly 2,000 students regarding their perceptions of higher education. The students, who were at least 13 years old, in high school or recently graduated, shared their perspectives on their plans for and perceptions of barriers to attaining an education. The Utah State University Utah Women in Leadership Project recently published a research brief analyzing the data. The report aims to provide insight into students' perspectives so that potential solutions are data-driven. Susan Madsen, founder and director of the project, said there is so much that is actionable from this research brief, and the reality is that parents, community members, religious leaders, teachers, and school personnel can start today by expressing support to young women. They can share information about opportunities for educational attainment, including how to pay for it, and chip away at the barriers that create doubt in their minds. Utah's female secondary school students are ambitious about their plans for educational attainment. In fact, 67.1% of young women responded that they would attend a four-year college, compared to 63.2% of young men. Of those who plan to pursue more education or training, 69% of young women plan to start right away. In contrast, 42.2% of young men were more likely to delay educational pursuits until after completion of a religious mission, compared to 12.2% of young women. Evacuation orders for Wasatch and Duchesne counties were lifted Saturday morning, but major areas impacted by the Yellow Lake fire do remain closed. Fire crews handling the Yellow Lake fire hope to start the rehabilitation while assessing the damage. As the grounds begin to improve, the fire perimeter will be reassessed, and the containment percentage, currently at 31%, will rise. Representatives of the Forest Service were questioned during a community meeting in Camas Saturday afternoon about a timeline for reentry into the closure areas of public lands. However, there are no answers at this time. Due to the expanse of the fire area, ground conditions, and weather delays, the rehabilitation process may take a while. Major hotspots remain in several isolated areas, with the threat of stepping into stump holes still burning underground. The cause of the fire is speculated to be human-caused, but is still under investigation by fire crews. And the Bryan Head Resort experienced heavy snowfall Friday morning, leaving several inches and more snow this weekend. The southern Utah resort, with a base elevation of 9,600 feet, had collected nearly 10 inches of snow, with a possibility of more to come. Due to the heavy snow, mountain operations crews broke out the snow guns to heat up the icy temperature on Navajo Peak. With their team working hard to get the mountains prepped for skiers and boarders, the Bryan Head Resort is scheduled to open on Friday, November 8th. KVNU weather brought to you by Cardall's Insulation. If your home was built before 1980, you should consider updating your insulation. Today's insulation is superior to what you'll find in older homes. Call Cardall's Insulation at 755-5012. Looking at tonight, mostly clear skies and some patchy fog after midnight, low in the mid-30s. Partly cloudy, some patchy morning fog on Tuesday, high in the upper 60s. Nice day Wednesday, sunny and around 70. Get more news at CashValleyDaily.com.
Roof Rescue is your local roof specialist, dedicated to keeping your home safe and dry no matter the weather. Their team of experienced roofers is here to serve you, providing top quality service at affordable prices. From minor repairs to complete roof replacements, they've got you covered. Remember, your roof is your first line of defense in protecting your family from the elements. So don't wait until the next storm to discover your roof problems. Call Roof Rescue today at 435-999-4268. They're your trusted local roofing experts, here to keep your home safe and dry. Roof Rescue, celebrating 10 years of providing watertight peace of mind.
News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
It's true, many of us spend more time thinking about what's for dinner than thinking about retirement. But if you think your retirement needs deserve more attention, we agree, and we like to help. We're Edward Jones. Together, we'll give your long-term retirement strategy the attention it deserves. Stop by your local Edward Jones office, one of 11 locations in Cache Valley. Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. Kamala Harris's campaign knows she needs to offer a change from the status quo, but she's struggling to identify what it will be. Also, new data shows more of us are upside down on our car loans. Why has this happened, and which vehicles does it happen to the most? And how to get access to more airport lounges during long waits. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. From 4 to 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM. Your station for news and talk.
KVNU's For the People with Jason Williams and Bill Walter.
And it is Utah known as the fraud capital of the world. Not because we have more people committing fraud, but because we have so many people falling for it.
Going beneath the headlines and connecting you to the newsmakers.
The radio is a great way to get the word out to a lot of people in an emergency. So we thank you for your help and being a partner with us.
For the People on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM, 102.1 FM. Online at 610kvnu.com and on the KVNU mobile app.
Welcome to KVNU's For the People. This is a beautiful Monday afternoon in Cache Valley. October 21st. I'm Jason Williams, and it is, it's feeling a little more like fall in October out there finally. But for a while, we've got a pretty warm day in the forecast this week, and then early next week back to more normal fall temperatures. It is, coming up on the show today, some things we haven't gotten to. Ballots are out there. If you haven't seen your ballot yet, in fact, well, I maybe wouldn't panic yet, but if you haven't, if you're registered, you think you're registered, you're expecting a ballot, and you haven't seen it by Wednesday at the latest, contact the clerk's office. It is there is still time. October 25th. Is the deadline for registering to vote online. After that, you would have to register on Election Day in person or early voting periods at the clerk's office with proper ID. So if you need to check your registration, make sure that, if maybe you've moved and forgotten to update your address and that's why you didn't get a ballot, go to vote.utah.gov before the 25th. You have up until 5 p.m. on the 25th, but I would do it before then. And they'll have time to sort out, if your ballot went out to an address you no longer live at, they'll have time to sort that out, cancel that ballot so it couldn't be used by anyone, which actually the signature not matching would stop that too, and then get you a new ballot printed. You'd have plenty of time to do that, but you have until 5 p.m. Friday. I would do it before then. And, of course, in person on Election Day is always an option if you forget in between now and then. So with that in mind, we're going to get to some highlights from we kind of, I kind of checked out a bit on the Utah Debate Commission debates. I heard them live, and I was underwhelmed by them all. Not necessarily the candidates, the questions, the format. I'm not a fan. But we had a few listeners over the weekend ask about highlights, saying that they don't care to go. You can watch all of these on the Utah Debate Commission's YouTube channel, but we had a few listeners over the last several days email in and say, they don't like to sit and watch on YouTube. There's not a convenient option for them to do that at their home for whatever reason. One individual, an older gentleman, said he just doesn't do that, can't stand doing that. So we've got some highlights for you we'll get to on the show today. We also have an update on things in North Carolina. We spoke a few weeks ago with Hannah Feinsilber, who is a USU PhD student from Black Mountain, North Carolina. And her family still lives there. They were right in the middle of the devastation of Hurricane Helene. And she spoke to us then about long-term recovery efforts, that once the immediate emergency recovery efforts are finished, which we're coming up on now a few weeks into this, long-term recovery efforts were a big concern. She said in the area where her family lives, an entire high school it is unusable. It will have to be demolished and rebuilt. There are grocery stores who, though they can now get their shelves stocked again, they don't have floors. One of them was missing a back wall. And she said this is a small town that depends on tourism for money. And, of course, with the roads closed or washed out, tourism isn't an option. Big concern for a lot of these families. So her family launched an effort to raise money, and we've got an update from her coming up later on in the show. So a lot to get to, of course. I also wanted to throw this out there. This is this is an ongoing problem. I hear a lot about this, but a couple of different things coming up for veterans. And we've talked with the Veteran Resource Center folks here on the show many times over, and they say, one of the biggest issues they find with veterans and family members of veterans is they just don't know of the resources that are out there. One of the issues that can often come up and can cause problems when it comes to healthcare coverage, to getting other benefits, even emergency benefits, lack of a veteran's health identification card. And it is ridiculously inconvenient to get a new one. I didn't know this, but I had the process described to me recently, and it is mind-blowing. Now, this isn't just the federal government. This is the state of Utah, too. And, folks, come on. I don't know who we need to talk to about this. Perhaps I'll bring it up. We'll be speaking with State Senator Chris Wilson tomorrow, doing a candidate spotlight. We spoke with his opponent in this race, Nancy Huntley, last Thursday. If you'd like to hear that on our podcast, Senator Wilson will be joining us tomorrow. Maybe I'll ask him about this. But I'm pretty sure it's not his fault because it's been this way for a long time. But it's a ridiculously complicated process. And a lot of times through expiration, loss, anything that could possibly mean a person no longer has their card, maybe they never got one, it can basically stop veterans from getting access to critical resources that are provided for veterans. And getting a new one it's easier to get a passport than to get a Veterans Health Identification Card. And that blows me away that we haven't fixed this. But there is an opportunity coming up. Now, this is not just for veterans in Cache County. If you know a veteran, if you're related to a veteran, if you work with a veteran, reach out to them, make sure they know about this, and so that they can spread the word to other veterans. But veterans in need of a Veterans Health Identification Card, Saturday, October 26th, from 1 to 6 p.m. at the Logan Library, 285 North Main Street in Logan. They are doing a Veterans Health Identification Card clinic, basically. Now, all you need is a form of state-recognized ID, a driver's license, or a state-issued ID card, and they'll walk you through the, again, insanely complicated paperwork for this. I mean, I guess to some extent it has to be a little difficult because, but it shouldn't be this difficult. Veterans, again, this is not just Cache County veterans. This is Box Elder County, Rich County, Franklin County. So if you know a veteran, if you live near a veteran in your neighborhood, you work with a veteran, related to a veteran, spread the word on this. Make sure they know so that they can then pass it on to their veteran groups that they might be a part of. But again, this is for Cache County, Box Elder County, Rich County, and Franklin County veterans. Help with getting a Veterans Health Identification Card. This event, again, it's free. It's at the Logan Library, Saturday, October 26th, this Saturday, 1 to 6 p.m., big 5-hour window there that you can get in. And again, all you need is a state-recognized driver's license or state-issued ID card. That's the only thing you need to take with you to go through this process. And you'll leave there, well, you won't leave with a card, but you'll leave there with a card on its way to you with Veterans Health Identification Card. Process, again, being so difficult, these folks are there to help you. So again, this is for veterans in Cache County, Box Elder County, Rich County, and Franklin counties. Help with getting a Veterans Health Identification Card, a ridiculously complicated thing. Shouldn't be that hard. They're here to help you, and they'll be at the Logan Library Saturday, October 26th, 1 to 6 p.m. And again, just bring a driver's license or a state-issued ID card. So spread the word on that. This is a pretty big deal. And again, I'm often surprised how often I hear of veterans who have had a hard time getting a replacement card or getting a card in the first place, getting one if it's lost or expired. And sometimes the process is so difficult they just don't. Yeah, this is a service provided to veterans that they should always have access to. But without that card, oftentimes they don't. So spread the word. Again, this Saturday, 1 to 6 p.m., Logan Library, for veterans in Cache, Box Elder, Rich, and Franklin counties. Get help, hands-on help. They'll walk you through the whole process, getting a Veterans Health Identification Card. Little announcement to start the show there. We'll be back with more of KVNU's For the People right after this.
News Talk 610 AM, 102.1 FM, KVNU.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me. I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
My son Ian was diagnosed with a brain tumor at the age of 16 months. The outlook was pretty rough. I mean, it was, we had no hope until St. Jude rescued us. I mean, they saved him. To this date, we are 12 years into this journey, and from day one, we've never once seen a bill. It gave us the peace of mind to know that we're there with our son, and we're gonna beat cancer together. Now, he is doing really, really well. He's alive because of what St. Jude has done. He's here because of the doctors who came before, their blood, their sweat, their tears, the knowledge accumulated and shared, with everyone else around the world. This is how we get rid of this, how we help kids beat cancer all over. It's the future.
Together, we will make yours possible for every child everywhere. Learn more at stjude.org.
The Aggies continue conference play Saturday as they travel to Wyoming to face the Cowboys.
Are we a confident team? We're probably the most 1-6 confident team in the country, but we just need to get better at our small details. And until we do, it's just too many one-on-one plays that we're losing.
Pre-game begins at 3, kickoff is at 5, and post-game and Aggie call immediately follows the game. It's the Aggies and the Cowboys, Saturday afternoon on News Talk KVNU.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. I like when listeners do this because sometimes I get caught in my own rut and what's interesting to me, and unless I'm pushed out of that occasionally by news events or listener demand, sometimes I skip over things that maybe I shouldn't. This is one of those situations. I watched the Utah Debate Commission's United States Senate debate a few weeks ago, and I talked about it on the show the next day. I talked about my I still have this question, are these useful? Does anyone learn anything from these? And we spent some time on that the next day. And then I recommend that everybody, if they are interested, go watch the whole thing, just over an hour long, on the Utah Debate Commission's YouTube channel. Then I moved on. And so over the last few weeks, I've got an email or two here and there from a listener saying, look, I don't watch stuff on YouTube. One listener, for example, an older gentleman said, the ads drive him nuts. He can never find anything. So he said, I didn't watch it. I couldn't see it live. Please run some highlights. And after 2 or 3 of these emails, I decided, okay, I didn't find it interesting. I didn't think the candidates said anything really too in depth about the issues. Not anything more than you could learn from reading their website. And so I kind of checked out on it at that point, and I shouldn't have, because I went back looking for clips for listeners to play for listeners, and I listened to some of the answers from the candidates in both the United States Senate debate and the Congressional District 1 debate with Congressman Blake Moore and Democrat Bill Campbell, and I realized there actually was more to some of their answers than I had given them credit for. And so coming up on the other side of the news, we'll do some highlights. Specifically, one question during the United States Senate debate in which the moderator asks about the national debt and balanced budgets at the federal level, but then says, be specific. Doesn't let him get away with the usual kind of talking points that both major parties especially like to rely on when it comes to complex issues like debt and immigration and healthcare policy and things like that. So the moderator said, what would you do to address the national debt and the budget deficit, which are two different things, and be specific. Specifically, what would you do? So we'll get to that. The 3 candidates who are on the stage, Democrat Carolyn Gleick, Independent American Party candidate Carlton Bowen, and of course Republican John Curtis, the current congressman, candidate for United States Senate. They all 3 had a chance to answer that one, so we'll get to that on the other side of the news. And again, appreciate listeners kind of pushing me on this one because I'd sort of scoffed at it and moved on. And I went back, I listened to some of the answers from the candidates and realized this was actually a more meaty debate than I had given it credit for. My skepticism about debates in general, I think, had caused me to not hear some things. It was better than I remembered. So before we get to that, we also got a question from listeners about ballots. Specifically, on your ballot, there are some judge retention questions from Supreme Court on down to local or jurisdictional courts in our region. This is always a difficult one to answer. I have a friend who votes no on judicial retention no matter what, because he said it just makes him feel better. That he thinks we should constantly be swapping judges. I don't know. I think the current makeup of the state Supreme Court has served Utah pretty well. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't disagreed with all the rulings or every judge's, whether they're in the majority or dissenting opinions, but I feel like there are people there who are taking the job very seriously and being careful, which is, I think, what a state Supreme Court should do. So I don't agree with just voting no for the sake of shaking things up every chance you get. But I also know it's almost impossible to find information about a judge. There is a resource here in Utah. So for those listeners who have asked, there is a resource here in Utah called the Utah Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission, JPEC. Now, one disclaimer on JPEC. The information you'll find there is factual. The information you'll find there is useful and could really help you decide on answering some of those judicial retention questions on your ballot. Should this judge be retained? But one little, I guess, qualification I would put on this is that the JPEC is not in the business. You're not going to find anything super negative there ever, because that's not what they're about. They are there to basically provide factual information about the judge. Now, you will find things if they have been. This was established by the legislature in 2008, and they evaluate judges before the ballot. And so you can search by judge. You can see public comments about a judge. You can now, if a judge has ever been before some sort of judicial conduct review, that will be listed there. But you're not going to find a lot of information like, this judge gets more complaints than the others. That's not what JPEC's all about. But it is a useful way, and really the only way, to take a look at the record, for lack of a better word, of our members of the judiciary here in Utah. So those listeners who wanted to know, that's my recommendation. Visit judges.utah.gov. This is, you can also submit public comments there throughout the year and even in non-election years. But that's what the public comments are for. You can go in and see, if a judge has gotten a lot of complaints about their courtroom behavior or things like that. But for the most part, what you're going to see is, evaluations of the judges, and then you can compare previous reports too. And then JPEC, they're very transparent. They actually have a great explainer there of how the judges are evaluated by their system, what system they use to evaluate judges. And so they have judges with unfavorable evaluation outcomes decide to step down from the bench, usually before the next election. That's why I say you won't find a lot of negative information there. If a judge has come under scrutiny by his or her superiors, that means a higher court has come down on them already, and usually they've stepped down, they've left the bench before then. So the judges that are up for retention are usually pre-filtered. So if there are bad apples, they don't last long. But judges also receive midterm evaluations from JPEC, but those evaluations are confidential. And they provide feedback more for the judge and aid in their professional development. It's not necessarily intended to be, for public consumption, because you have to understand their jobs. You can't talk about what the judges often know and hear in the courtroom or in chambers for a particular trial or case, because there's a lot of personal information that comes up in a court proceeding. So they can't just post audio to a website. So that's why JPEC was invented by the legislature, to say, look, the public needs some way, even though it's not as thorough as most people would like, they need some way to evaluate judges and see independent judicial performance evaluations, meaning these evaluations were done by people who are not in the legal profession. So again, the Utah Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission can be found, JPEC, as it's known, can be found at judges.utah.gov. So if you have questions about filling out that portion of your ballot, there are, depending on where you live, there could be anywhere between 2 and 5 here in northern Utah judicial retention questions on your ballot. Should this judge be retained? And if you'd like to go look those specific judges up by name, again, judges.utah.gov. So That's for you, Emily. Emily emailed in and said, I have no idea how to vote on these ever. What resources do I have for seeing judicial evaluations? Well, there you have it. JPEC, Utah Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission, judges.utah.gov. And we'll be back with more of For the People on the other side of these headlines with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News brought to you by Logan Extermination. Several law enforcement officers and volunteers from the Utah National Guard were out at Farmington Bay again over the weekend trying to find clues about the location of Matthew Johnson's body. Officials from the Cottonwood Heights Police Department filed charges earlier in the week against Johnson's wife, Jennifer Gledhill. Cell phone data from the night police believe Gledhill shot and killed Johnson showed she had driven north into Davis County. Gledhill's phone was pinged in the area of Legacy Parkway and the West Davis corridor. That's where police and National Guard volunteers were looking for a shallow grave where they believe Gledhill buried Johnson's body. Searchers were combing through the area Sunday with metal detectors looking for any clues. Officials said they have not been able to find anything. Devin Dampier and Eli Sanders had touchdown runs in the final 3:53 to rally New Mexico to a 50-45 victory over Utah State on Merlin Olsen Field Saturday afternoon. Sanders also had the first of three rushing scores, a 20-yarder in the final quarter for New Mexico, which trailed 38-23 at one point in the second half after Sanders scored to get the Lobos within 38-36 with 10:18 to go. Utah State answered with Herschel Turner's 43-yard run for a 9-point advantage. Dampier ran it in from 5 yards out, and Sanders added a 12-yard scoring run with 1:13 left to play to pull out the victory. Utah State is next on the road at Wyoming this Saturday afternoon. Mike Bajakian has been elevated to Utah's interim offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. Utah coach Kyle Whittingham made the announcement today in his weekly press conference. Bajakian, an offensive analyst, will replace Andy Ludwig, who resigned on Sunday. The Utes have lost 3 straight games and totaled 36 points in those losses. KVNU weather brought to you by Roof Rescue, dedicated to keeping your home safe and dry from minor repairs to complete roof replacement. Celebrating 10 years of providing watertight peace of mind. For tonight, mostly clear, patchy fog after midnight, low in the mid-30s, some patchy morning fog, giving way to partly cloudy skies on Tuesday. High temperature in the upper 60s. Get more news at CashValleyDaily.com.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. The head of the federal disaster agency FEMA has had to again today knock down falsehoods about the federal hurricane response repeated by a presidential candidate. Deanne Criswell says they're not out of money. They have $7.5 billion in the disaster relief fund, despite former President Trump's claims to the contrary. And Criswell saying that money is not being diverted to any migrants, as Mr. Trump claims.
No money out of the disaster relief fund has gone to anyone but somebody impacted by a disaster.
Republican and Democratic governors affected by the hurricanes have praised the federal response. Mr. Trump is in Concord, North Carolina this evening at a faith leaders meeting. VP Harris with former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney in Brookfield, Wisconsin. In Royal Oak, Michigan, Harris reacting to former President Donald Trump's non-answer on raising the federal minimum wage, arguing that an increase would help Americans. This is ABC News.
Even though the weather's grown colder, you still have time to have your fruit trees pruned. Logan Extermination says your trees need to be trimmed back in order to achieve success next year. And this is the first step to a bountiful harvest. However, you could do more bad than good if you don't know what you're doing. Save the headache and call Logan Extermination today and get a jump on tree pruning. Prices will vary depending on your needs. Logan Extermination, 752-8450.
From ABC News, Wall Street now. After steady record highs and advances by the major indexes, maybe some profit-taking Monday with a mixed outcome. The Dow lost 344 points. The S&P 500 down 11, coming off its 6th straight winning week, its longest such stretch of the year. but the Nasdaq gained 50 points. Trading was mixed in markets around the world. Crude oil prices rose to regain some of last week's sharp losses, while U.S. Treasury yields climbed and stock indexes mostly fell in Europe after finishing mixed in Asia. The rise in yields helped knock down stocks that tend to get hurt by higher interest rates, such as big dividend payers and businesses in the housing industry. Real estate owners fell to the sharpest loss among the 11 sectors that make up the S&P 500 index, while home builders, Lennar and D.R. Horton, both fell. More than 100 companies in the S&P 500 are on deck to give details this week about their performances during the summer. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Happy birthday, Bell Medical. For 8 years, we have had the privilege of helping people feel confident and love their bodies. To celebrate, we're offering a special on our Bell Sculpt 360 procedure for only $4,800. And for those looking to enhance their transformation, you can bundle it with a mini tuck for $9,500. Slim down, sculpt your body, and boost your confidence. We've helped thousands of patients feel their best, and we'd love to do the same for you. Let's celebrate together. Schedule your free consultation today at bellmedical.com. That's BELLE medical.com.
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. Kamala Harris's campaign knows she needs to offer a change from the status quo, but she's struggling to identify what it will be. Also, new data shows more of us are upside down on our car loans. Why has this happened, and which vehicles does it happen to the most? And how to get access to more airport lounges during long waits. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. From 4 to 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM. Your station for news and talk.
Change, change, change. Change, change, change.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. The Utah Debate Commission hosted, two debates relevant to us here in northern Utah. 3 if you count the gubernatorial debate, but we did actually tune in to that one during the show. Some highlights, at least. But then when it came to the United States Senate debate and the Congressional District 1 debate with Congressman Blake Moore and challenger Democrat Bill Campbell, I recapped them in voice only the next day on the show after the debates happened. And then I moved on, and when I got the third email, 3 different listeners, but when I got the third email from a listener saying, hey, I'd recommended that people, if they want to see the debates, if they didn't see them live, check or hear them broadcast live here on our airwaves, check them out on YouTube, where the Utah Debate Commission posts the full video. When I got the third email from a listener saying, look, I don't watch YouTube. One was an older gentleman who said, I can't stand YouTube. The ads drive me nuts. I can't find anything. And I didn't watch it live. Where can I find some highlights other than YouTube? And so I thought, okay, you know what? I'll go back and we'll pull out some highlights for listeners to hear. And I let these listeners know we'd be doing this today. And as I got listening to the debates, I realized that there was at least one question that I'd kind of poo-pooed these harshly. I don't like the format. I watch these and I think, who learned anything other that would be different than just going to the candidate's website and reading their position pages? And is it really any different to hear them speaking it rather than... I was wrong, though. I judged too harshly. Because especially in the United States Senate debate, I found 2 questions in which the answers from the 3 candidates were actually really illuminating. If you're an undecided voter out there, maybe an unaffiliated or independent voter, and you're trying to decide between the 3 candidates in the United States Senate race that you'll see on your ballot, which are independent American candidate Carlton Bowen, Democrat Carolyn Gleick, and Republican Representative John Curtis, current congressman running for United States Senate here in Utah. If you're really, truly undecided, I realized there were actually 2 portions of this debate in which their answers could really help a voter sort out who to cast their vote for. And so I appreciate listeners kind of pushing me on this one. At least 3 listeners who emailed in and said, you say to go watch it on YouTube if you didn't hear the broadcast on KVNU or watch it on TV that night. I don't use YouTube. And I thought, you know what, you're not missing out. But I went back, I rewatched looking for clips for these 3 listeners that emailed in over the last couple of weeks. And like I say, I was wrong. Specifically, this question right here. This was a question posed during the United States Senate debate a couple of weeks, about 10 days ago, to Representative John Curtis, the Republican, Carolyn Gleich, the Democrat, and Carlton Bowen, the independent American candidate. All three qualified through Utah Debate Commission's polling to be there on the stage that night. And they were asked a question by the moderator about the national debt and the budget deficit, two different things. And what made this question unique, or the answers rather unique, is the moderator said, be specific. What would you do to reduce national debt, to close up somewhat at least the budget deficit each year at the federal level, and be specific? And here are how the candidates answered, with Representative John Curtis going first.
I believe the path to Washington, D.C. is littered with politicians who've said they're going back to fix the deficit. As a matter of fact, the deficit today is 300% larger than when we sent the Tea Party back to Washington, D.C. to fix it. It's clear that what we're doing is not working. One of the points that I've been advocating for in Washington, D.C. is a model done here in Utah. It's called a baseline budget. At the beginning of every legislative session, they agree that if they don't agree on a budget, instead of going into a shutdown or a CR or an omnibus, they actually continue on last year's budget. If we could enact that one thing in Washington, D.C., I think that would do more to bend the spending curve than anything else we do. Last year, I was successful with Thomas Massey in getting a similar amendment put into it. It was a little bit different. It had a minus 2% penalty. I actually think a better option would have been to stay on the current budget, because they just did an omnibus because of the 2%. So that's what I'm working on, and hopefully we can be successful at.
Ms. Gleich, talk to us about how you would approach the national debt.
Well, I grew up with a family value of frugality. My parents sewed their own sleeping bags and outdoor equipment. And then as a small business owner, I carried forward that same ethos of not spending more than I brought in and making sure to save for emergencies. And we need the federal government to do the same thing, because right now, future generations like mine are going to be saddled with this enormous burden. Currently, the interest on the federal debt is more than the entire federal budget, and this situation is completely unsustainable. So as Utah's next U.S. Senator, I would close the billionaire tax loopholes that allow someone like Jeff Bezos to pay an effective 1% tax rate. And I would work to end other loopholes for corporations to bring more money in as revenue, and we're not going to achieve this unless we change who we send to be our elected officials.
Mr. Bowen, your thoughts on the national debt?
We're running on a platform of traditional money, which means more than using the gold and silver coin our founding fathers envisioned and that the U.S. Constitution still requires. It also means a free market capitalist economy, not crony capitalism, not communism, not socialism, but a true free market where consumers, not the government, choose the winners and losers. It also means fiscal responsibility with balanced budgets and reducing the national debt. I agree with Mr. Curtis that what we've been doing is not working, because when both parties are in office, they're both increasing the debt. It doesn't matter if either party controls all the branches of government, the debt continues to go up. So we need to do something different. I want to finish my last statement about traditional families, because it's important. Families are extremely important. We need to make sure that, and ideally they have a mom and a dad, married, trying, and true. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. Honesty and integrity still matter.
All right.
There you have it. Three answers from three candidates on one question, with Carlton Bowen, the independent American candidate, kind of, I'm not sure what he was talking about in his answer, I'll be honest with you, going off onto another issue instead of being specific as the moderator asked. But the two major party candidates, Representative John Curtis, the Republican, and Carolyn Gleich, the Democrat, gave very specific answers and very different answers. And I got thinking, okay, if I'm an undecided voter, if I'm unaffiliated, I'm independent, I'm moderate, middle of the road, and I really, can't decide between these two, those two answers provided two very specific ways forward when it comes to the federal budget deficit. Neither one of them really talked about debt, but the federal budget deficit, they both said Curtis saying he'd like to see a baseline budget rule like the state of Utah has, where if there's an aggressive disagreement over budgetary issues, instead of being pressured by this counting clock of a budget or a government shutdown if they don't approve a budget, or passing these stopgap continuing resolutions, or throwing it all in a giant omnibus bill that no one dares vote against. He said, I would rather see them agree to a baseline budget where if there is a negotiation that's broken down over the budget, they would default to the previous year's budget. And that way it would depoliticize, because right now you have, depending on who's in the minority, you have incentive for members, especially in the House, to not reach consensus on the budget, because it'll make the minority or the majority party look bad if there's a government shutdown. So if you take that away, as Curtis is proposing, you might actually force Congress to do their job. I like the idea. For Gleik's part, Carolyn Gleik, the Democrat in the race, she said, she sees the budget deficit problem as a lack of a revenue issue with the what are commonly known as the Trump tax cuts. This opened up a lot of tax cutting for some very wealthy individuals. It was delayed, so the first 2 years, the middle class got the majority of the tax cuts, and then it shifted after 2 years, and so now those who make over $250,000 up to billions see the largest percentage of the tax cuts. And so Gleik saying she would reverse that. She would flip that around to the way it was in the first 2 years of what are commonly known as the Trump tax cuts passed in 2017. And she would flip that. She would reverse that as it was in the first 2 years compared to how it is now. Two very different visions for reducing debt. Economists will tell you, either one of these would work. Congress having to actually do its job instead of political brinksmanship over the debt ceiling or the budget expiring or anything like that, where the minority, whoever's in the minority, has every incentive to stymie all negotiations because it'll make the majority party look bad. Take that politicization away, take the incentive to let the talks break down away, could solve a lot of problems. So I like Curtis's approach, and economists will also tell you, Gleik is right, that if you have a revenue, if you increase revenue, you could close that budget deficit gap. So, but again, two very different visions for how to deal with the budget deficit from the two major party candidates, at least. And then Carlton Bowen, again, they're answering, but kind of talking about gold and silver, and then going off onto a culture war stump speech instead of getting specific. Three different candidates, three different answers, and I was wrong. This was actually a useful debate, at least on that question. But there was another question that was also useful, and we'll get to that right after this.
Did your washer just quit and now your laundry is piling up? If your appliance is broken down, give Daryl's Appliance a call. This is Jay with Daryl's Appliance. We are the only appliance shop in Cache Valley that offers service and sales. That means we have an exclusive, no stress service call offer. You can apply your service trip fee to a new appliance if you decide you want a new appliance instead. Save time and money with everything under one roof. Servicing northern Utah and southern Idaho at Daryl's Appliance, west on Airport Road. See store for details.
I spend a lot of time in the garage, but even more time in the rain, sleet, and mud. In 95, I helped tow your moving trailer. In 05, I helped you get out of a ditch. Yeah, I know I'm a bit rusty, and sadly in 09, it was sparks from me, your handy chains, dragging behind your truck that accidentally started a wildfire.
Sparks from dragging chains can start a wildfire. Spark a change. not a wildfire. Visit SmokeyBear.com. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Do you know a champion in our community? Nominate them for the KVNU Above and Beyond Salute. Every Friday morning at 8:30, we'll spotlight a firefighter, law enforcement officer, healthcare worker, or other deserving individual and give them a $40 gift card to Firehouse Subs. Submit your nominations for the Above and Beyond Salute by visiting kvnutalk.com. Help us recognize the champions in our communities. The Above and Beyond Salute, sponsored by Firehouse Subs on News Talk KVNU, the voice of Northern Utah.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. I'd originally panned the Utah Debate Commission's United States Senate debate, and after a few listeners that emailed in said they don't use YouTube, they missed the live broadcast here on our airwaves or as it was televised, and they wanted to know where they could watch. Well, if you don't use YouTube, there isn't another way. That's where the Utah Debate Commission put them. So I thought we'll do some highlights for these listeners. One was an older gentleman who said he can't stand YouTube, and I totally sympathize. But as I got listening to the candidates' responses, I realized I shouldn't have scoffed at this debate, or debates in general, because their answer, I still am skeptical that debates are super useful for undecided voters. I know they're not useful for the partisans, people who know who they're voting for as soon as an election is announced. But for the undecided voters, I've always long thought that debates were actually can be misleading or confusing. A candidate that's not serious can sound serious for 2 minutes in a response. A candidate who is very serious can sound unserious and like a fool if they flub a 2-minute response. It's not a great way to get to know the candidates. But then I heard the candidates' answers on, as you heard before the break there, the federal budget deficit. And this was independent American candidate Carlton Bowen, Democrat Carolyn Gleick, and Republican Representative John Curtis answering these questions. I realized there was some meat to this debate. And this was another question that was asked in which, if you're an undecided voter in this race, you really got to know who these candidates are. The question was, how do you plan to help states like Utah be affordable places to live?
For that question, and on the campaign trail, I've heard from a lot of students like yourself. I've heard from folks that are working multiple jobs, going to school full-time, and they're still struggling to pay for their rent or for their mortgages, or they're worried about being one healthcare crisis away from losing the roof over their head. And that is not okay, because we need to ensure that future generations have the same potential to live the American dream. So as Utah's next senator, I would support expanding a first-time home buyer's tax incentive to help people get into the purchase of their first home. I would also support developing a federal agency to study how many Americans and Utahns are experiencing homelessness and what are the factors that are leading people to have to live on the streets. And we can do a lot better for young people in addressing this by also raising the federal minimum wage up from $7.25 an hour, because I don't know about you, but I could not get out of the grocery store for less than $50. And if you're getting paid minimum wage, that's a full day's work.
Mr. Bowen.
I would like to point out that this is a state and local issue, not a federal issue. But there are a couple of things that the federal government does that impact it. And this falls under my traditional money platform pillar. So I'm against socialism, and I'm also against price controls. And what we have with interest rates, which is a huge part of housing affordability, is a price control by the Federal Reserve, where they artificially set what interest rates are. And we've seen that where interest rates have gone to 2% to 7% in a little more than a year's time over the past year. This limits the free market. I would like to see a free market rate, which I think then would work better. Also, I don't agree with the state legislation that rewards builders, which are a special interest, by making state credits only available for example, for new construction. And the other part of this is inflation. The federal spending is driving the inflation. That's what is driving the housing prices.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Curtis, the final response goes to you.
Yes, I would actually like to agree with a couple of points to Carlton. Let me start with the state, city, county role. A lot of this can be done at that level, but there is a role for the federal government. As you mentioned, inflation is one of the single biggest problems, and right now you have to point squarely at the federal government. They taught me when I was at BYU that inflation is the result of too much money spending too much money on too few goods. And what are we doing as a federal government? We're turning on the faucet of spending, and we're putting our neck on the supply chain. We need to do those two things. I have some specifics as well. We just introduced me and my staff this week. It's called the Homes Act. It actually allows those of us who have IRA money. Currently, you can use IRA money to invest in real estate, but you can't do it for your own home or your children's home. My bill would actually change that. I would also point out Senator Lee's bill, the Houses Act, which lets us use federal land for housing here in Utah. That would be a very big deal.
All three candidates there, Carlton, John, and Caroline, answering that question. How, as a federal delegate in the United States Senate, what would you do to make sure Utah is an affordable place to live? And three very different answers. So, again, I stand corrected. I had scoffed at these debates. I hadn't really recommended that people go watch them because I'm skeptical of the whole debate format, that it's useful for undecided voters. I know it's absolutely useful for decided voters. You won't learn anything in a debate that changes your mind if you already know who you plan to vote for. But if you're undecided, I thought these debates weren't more useful than going and reading candidates' websites, and I was wrong. Because those were three answers. Now you're going to agree or disagree with two of the three, right? In your answers to these two questions, but they were illuminating. They let you know who these candidates are, where they're coming from, what they would do if elected. So, to you out there, John and Mark and Lucille, who emailed in about these debates, wanting to hear some highlights here on the show, saying you listen to talk radio, you never watch YouTube. I get it. There's some highlights for you, and hopefully that was useful. For others out there, you can watch the entire debate on YouTube. That is the only place you'll find that. And appreciate listeners pushing me on this one, because it was interesting to go back and rewatch these debates and change my mind and realize these actually were kind of useful. So, sorry for all the bad-mouthing, Utah Debate Commission. And we'll keep the candidate spotlights going. Highlights from the Congressional District 1 debate, which I also changed my mind on. That's tomorrow on the show. We'll also speak with Chris Wilson, State Senator Chris Wilson, for a candidate spotlight tomorrow. But stick around. In hour 2 and up.